guys, welcome to our third lesson in the Remote Media Studies unit. Today is going to be a little bit shorter than usual, or at least you'll have less work to do because hopefully, as you already know, you have attended the live class where we did a Kahoot together. So this is just something that's supplementary. Hopefully the live classes worked. If not, then we'll try to work out a time to meet again and go over any of your questions and just get you guys talking to one another and give me a chance to check in with you. There are just a couple things to write down in your homework journals. Most of you have turned in your rough draft of your articles from a couple of weeks ago, but there are still a few of you who are missing that. So just make sure you get those in because we are going to be coming back to that, right? That's going to be part of our project based work that we're doing for this unit. So make sure that you get that article in. You're just gonna save yourself some future hassle because you're eventually gonna have to do that step in order to get the next step done. So remember, writing is a process, right? And then for classwork, we only have classwork this time. You're gonna find an example of either a broadsheet or a tabloid and describe 3 clues that helped you to determine which category that goes into. So if you found a broadsheet, you're going to tell us 3 things that makes it a broadsheet. If you find a tabloid, you're going to tell us 3 things that made it a tabloid, how you made your determination. If you don't know how to do that yet, that's okay. Today's learning intention has everything to do with that, right? So write this down, make sure in your copies. Hopefully you've collected your English materials already. I don't have my slide up for you yet, but you've needed your homework journals and your copybooks already. Remember, open your copybooks to the next new page for English. Write down today's date, Thursday, February 4th. The topic is tabloids versus broadsheets. Remember, we're going to have copybook checks at a later point, so make sure that you're writing this down. And remember, the colorful words are the most important, right? So remember, you've got to be able to understand and explain, and you've got to know those 2 terms, a tabloid or a broadsheet. And success is going to look like, your homework, right? It's going to look like being able to do your homework well. So if you haven't already, make sure you've got your English materials together. If you get them together just now, you might want to pause or go back to the beginning of the video and make sure that you've got everything. Remember, while you guys are remote learning, you can always keep your phone out as long as it's not going to be distracting you. You might want to disable notifications for the time being if you need to look at a screen. So once you've done that, then in your copies, I want you guys to do a quick review of what you did last time. Which of these terms is illustrated by the photo that you see? So make a guess. Those terms should all be written in your copy already. So which of those terms is illustrated by that photo? Just as a side note, hopefully those are all written in your copybook. Okay. It's from the Wall Street Journal, and as you can see in the context, it's probably a little bit easier to see there. That is a headline, so give yourselves a pat on the back if you put a headline. That was a headline of the Wall Street Journal. Let's look at another one. So for this one, what I didn't put an arrow there, but what I want is this little, you can't really even see the words, but this little bit of text that's right underneath that picture of the woman who is having her hair done. What does that illustrate? All right, time's up. Ding, ding, ding. That one was caption. So if you said that was caption, you are absolutely correct. Really quickly, just take a minute and point out anything else that you see that might be that might fit with one of those categories. I see a headline, obviously, again, and the title of the newspaper. These are almost like advertisements because even though they're advertising the paper that it's in, it's kind of like, hey, buy this paper, or you'll get to read about this. Another headline. And if this thing stops popping up in front of it, it looks like there's a date line, and well, here's the date line for the whole paper. Then there are some bylines there too. All right, moving on. So we've reviewed in your copies. I also want you to write down this chart, right? So you're going to need to write some notes about what a broadsheet is all about. What are some of the characteristics of a broadsheet? What are characteristics of a tabloid? And these are kind of your buzzwords for this today, right? Headlines, we've already talked about headline, headline, headline. You probably are sick of that word. We're going to talk a little bit about the size, right? Or at least the history of the size. Talk about the topics or the stories covered, images, price, color, word choice. Hopefully we'll get to all of that. But just write down, you can kind of like make a little note of those words if you want, but make sure that you've got that chart in your copybooks. All right, so just take a minute and think about this. What is the difference between the two newspapers that you see? And I'm going to start going a little bit faster through this because I know you guys can pause and take all the time that you need to just consider any questions that I'm asking you. So the differences that you see, so first of all, this one's very colorful, right? And this one has a little bit less color. The print is much smaller here. Both of them have pictures, but this one has a little bit less in terms of pictures. Maybe you've noticed some other things that make a difference between these two examples of a front page. And hopefully you already know this, but if this is new to you, the one on the left is going to be a broadsheet, and the one on the right is going to be a tabloid, right? Broadsheets, we'll get into this a little bit more. Broadsheets are typically kind of like more kind of traditional papers, kind of highbrow papers. Tabloids are a little bit more sensational. They're kind of made for an audience. It's like everybody, like a general readership, whereas broadsheets were typically for kind of like well-educated, really kind of highbrow people. But so that's just a little bit about it. Let's take a look at these. So we took a look at the differences at the ones in the last slide. Maybe think about how those compare to this one. So what are the differences? And maybe think about which one do you think is the tabloid? Which one do you think is the broadsheet? Oh, if you said that the tabloid was the one on the left, you are correct. The broadsheet is the one on the right. Maybe you guys have some interesting things that you've noticed. This is colorful, right? But it still has the small text, the stories that are going to be a little bit more kind of specific to kind of, sort of a specific kind of readership, right? House prices falling. Maybe not everybody wants to read about house prices falling, but, probably everyone wants to read about, different experiences of doctors or kind of more human interest stories. So just really quickly stop and jot in your copies. Think about one of the papers that you saw in those two slides and just think, who do you think it's aimed at? Like what kind of person would pick up that paper, and try to be as specific as you can, right? You don't have to give your person a name or anything like that, but just what kind of job might they have? What sort of interests do they have? What kind of background do they come from? And how do you know just based off of what you're seeing in the paper? Okay, you guys have already stopped and written. So I'm going to share now with you some major differences. So broadsheets date back to a time when it was actually cheaper to print really long papers, like long, big papers that had few pages. So that's why newspapers have that format now that we recognize, that it's like, it has a center fold and you have to unfold it and have really, big arms in order to stretch the whole thing out. It's because of this tradition of like how papers were printed and how much they cost. So they used to be an A2 size. They're getting consistently smaller. And I'll give you an example of one local paper that's shrunk over time, right? But even like, the New York Times has shrunk by a couple of inches. Like they're getting smaller and smaller and more compact because obviously it's really not great to be carrying a big paper. And most broadsheets might be just the size of tabloids today. So that's a used to be thing. It's not really the case anymore. They can be all sizes. The headlines are more informative. They're usually more about the community, right? There's a formal style of writing, and there's a wide range of news reports. There's a lot of text and analysis of the news. Tabloids are really more kind of just for fun reading, or they're sensational, right? They kind of are more like a magazine size, like a little slightly bigger, right? Newspaper print or newsprint, but they're a little bit like typically they're not anymore, but they used to be a little smaller than broadsheets. Their headlines are sensational. They have a less formal style of writing. It's usually human interest stories, meaning like something that like it's not necessarily even news, but it's something that's going on that people might be interested in. It's like gossip in a way. There's color, there's bold headlines, there's lots more photographs in a tabloid, right? We can see that just in the couple that we looked at. Look at how many photos are over there and how many photos are over there. And there's an emphasis on entertainment, right? They want to sell the tabloid. So here's what I want you to do. So for the classwork, you're going to find a front page and you're going to tell me if it's a tabloid or a broadsheet. Tell me how you know and give 3 specific reasons and try to use the terms we've covered. So you have to use 3 of the terms that we talked about. So remember heading, subheading, article, picture, caption, advertisement, byline, dateline, placeline. Make sure that you use 3 of those words in your response, right? So for example, this is a kind of shout out to someone who did a good job on their homework too, labeling their homework. They did 1 extra. So this person might go back to this article. I haven't shown you where it comes from, although you can kind of see in the small print. They might say like, oh, okay, so this article is clearly a tabloid, or it's clearly a broadsheet, and I can tell because the heading does what, right? Or this is the kind of story that is covered in the heading, right? And you might go back to just this page and see like, okay, well, the headlines are going to be informative, right? So is this headline informative or is it a little bit more sensational? And then that's going to be what you do to write your response. Right, that's all you have to do. One last thing, just remember that sometimes things are tricky, right? Like the Echo started off being published in a broadsheet format, and then since the 90s, I think since 1991, it's been published in a tabloid format, right? But it still has a lot of like community-based news, and it's a reliable news source, right? Another thing too, the Daily News was kind of like the Echo in New York City. It's also published in a tabloid format, and it does have a lot of sensational news, but it's also won a lot of prestigious journalism prizes. Like the Pulitzer Prize, I think they've won 11 Pulitzer Prizes. So, just because something is a tabloid doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to have trustworthy information or that there's not real reporting that's going on there. So it's tricky to try and keep them straight. So make sure that you're really thinking through and using some of that information to make a determination about the headline, about the front page that you find for homework. All right, guys. Can't wait to see you next time I see you. Hope you're doing well. And next time we're going to be coming back to those articles that you wrote for homework last class. So do make sure that you go back and write them if you haven't gotten a chance yet. If you're confused, reach out to me. Just, you can even send me something that's not done yet and just say, I don't know where to go from here. I'd be happy to give you some suggestions about things to add or people to talk to in order to complete your work. All right, talk to you soon. Bye.